Welcome back, everybody. Voice of Leroy Smart bringing us in. The Dawn, Mr. Smart, in dubwise fashion. So we do it. This is part 4 of my look at the history and development of dub within reggae through some of the records I have on hand in my collection. Be sure and check out the previous episodes if you haven't. From the first tentative initial offerings of dub LPs on the market, testing the market, extremely limited releases, almost impossible to attain those very first albums on original format today. From about 1974 and 1975. By 1977, Black Echo's Music Mag in the UK was already able to compile a top 125 dub albums. Just think about it, that's within only a couple of short years. Even discounting some of the anomalies in the marketplace, some LPs are kind of listed twice due to the vagaries of being released without titles on blank releases, being released with alternative titles, alternative covers sometimes would happen with these dub LPs. The same album would be released under different titles, different cover art. Even taking into account some of that confusion, and some of the things on that list are not what we would strictly call dub nowadays. It's clear within a couple of short years from the very first dub LPs that there was an explosion of dub on the marketplace. What we're listening to figures at number 12 on that list. This is Rasclat Dub from producer Tommy Cowan. This dubs 2 tracks by Leroy Smart, as we heard, as well as Jacob Miller and others. Also a cover of Bob Marley's Talking Blues, as done by the Cimarrons. Rasclat Dub, probably no mixer credited here, probably various engineers doing the actual mixing. This is original pressing on Grunation label from the UK. Little bit of snap, crackle, and pop with the mix there. Number 12, that LP probably would not figure near as high nowadays, but in 1977 it was regarded enough to be ranked that highly. Number 1, incidentally, was King Tubby Meets the Upsetter at the Grassroots of Dub, the Winston Edwards album. Shows how influential that one was. Maybe not quite so well known nowadays. Of the initial pioneers of dub, King Tubby's studio would be the main outlet for dub, for those, especially for those producers who did not have access to their own studio. They would record their songs, then bring the completed tapes to King Tubby's studio to get remixed in a dub fashion, and often multiple cuts done. King Tubby's continued to be the main channel. Other studios soon got into the dub game. Curiously, Lee Perry, one of the originators, did not put out a huge amount of dub LPs. He put out Revolution Dub in 1975. I do not have that one, I don't believe. He did put out his classic Super Ape album around 1977. Super Ape, not kind of strictly 100% a dub album. There are some vocals on it, but definitely deserves to be considered within the dub category overall due to his use of dub mixing techniques. But Lee Perry's creativity at this time, at the height of the Black Ark studio, could not be, he could not color within the numbers. He would mix all these styles all together, often within the same record. A perfect example of this is this mini LP EP by the Heptones on the original Upsetters. Heptones Disco Dub, hopefully that shows up. 2 tracks on each side with cuts of the Heptones Why Must I Shall Be Released, Mr. President, and Crying Over You, and Lee Perry probably mixing live at the time, incorporating DJ vocals, incorporating the Heptones' original vocals, incorporating dub, all on the same record, all at the same time. He could not be confined to playing by the rules. Such was his flurry of creativity in those years. There's two studios with the biggest selection of rhythm tracks to draw from to be remixed in dub soon got into the game. Studio where the very first dub was created, Treasure Isle Studio. By the time the dub LPs came along, the founder of Treasure Isle Studio, Treasure Isle Records, Duke Reid the Trojan, his name actually inspired the UK Trojan Records label. He fell into ill health by the early 70s, sold his catalog of music to a lady named Sonia Pottinger, but with the rich Treasure Isle heritage of rhythms to draw from, they soon put out Treasure Isle dub albums, even though these songs were going back to the late 1960s, the rocksteady era, which was the glory days of the Treasure Isle studio. Still, they dusted off those tracks, remixed them in dub style, and Treasure Isle Dub was one of the first collections to appear. There was a volume 2 as well. These were mixed by Errol Brown in the Treasure Isle studio, after Sonia Pottinger had taken over from Duke Reid, the Trojan. Treasure Isle in dub. These took old rock-steady tracks from the late 60s, updated them with dub mixing techniques that capitalized on some of the, I guess you could say, the nostalgia factor of dub, reusing songs that the audience was already familiar with and presenting them in a new, exciting format, new mix, new things to look forward to. Next to Duke Reid, of course, Studio One had the hugest selection of classic rhythm tracks that everybody knew, almost a common language within reggae. Everybody knows these rhythms. Coxsone Dodd, founder of Studio One, soon got into the dub game. Mostly considered to be mixed by himself, personally, at his studio. Put out a dozen dub albums, starting with Dub Store Special, and including titles like Bionic Dub. This is the only one I have. High Fashion Dub Top 10. It's a later pressing. All the Studio One dub albums, very expensive to get. Super heavyweight pressing here. Classic black and white Studio One label. Not the greatest pressing, but certainly a heavy, solid one. The Studio One dubs have also been compiled a couple of times. Heartbeat Records put out a set called Version Dread. Dub Specialist was Coxsone Dodd's kind of name on record for dub albums. This appeared in 2006, double LP from the Heartbeat Records label, which had a special relationship with Coxsone Dodd, the Dodd family, and the Studio One catalog. Soul Jazz Records has also gotten into the game. Studio One Dub, just compiled from the various Studio One Dub LPs. Going back to Treasure Isle, Errol Brown continued mixing dubs into the Sonia Pottinger era of Treasure Isle Studio, mixing albums, compiling her work with the group Culture Dub, and Medley Dub. This is a recent reissue on Dr. Bird Records out of the UK. Lovely cover art on the original Culture in Dub LP. I don't know why they changed that artwork. It's gorgeous. All Errol Brown mixes, kind of one of the unsung dub mixers. Another one was Sylvan Morris. Sylvan Morris was actually involved at Studio One in the classic period of the late 60s, early 70s, was actually doing the hands-on producing. Of course, the label owner in Jamaican music always takes the credit. Usually there's somebody else not getting the credit that's doing the actual producing in the studio, arranging sessions, creating the music. Sylvan Morris was the guy during that key phase of Studio One productions for a time. And following his departure from Studio One, went to work for the producer Harry Johnson, who in a couple of years before had been responsible for the great Liquidator hit, which was a huge hit in the UK market, was later sampled by the staple singers in the US. The Liquidator, still used at football matches today. Sylvan Morris began mixing a lot of dubs for Harry Johnson, nicely compiled on this set. That's Sylvan Morris there. The mixing desk at Harry Johnson's studio is actually the very one that the first 4 Bob Marley albums were recorded on. First 4 Island albums. It's a nice set that appeared on the Dr. Buster Dynamite label several years ago. Compiles Sylvan Morris dubs recorded at Harry Johnson's studio. Some of the dub covers there, Cultural Dub and others. That is Roosevelt Avenue dub, that album's called. One of those albums that Sylvan Morris mixed was called Jagan, versions of Leslie Butler instrumentals. This appeared on the Trojan label in the UK, classic Trojan, 1970s in here, late 1970s. As the dub explosion kicked off, every producer with a stockpile of rhythms, enough to put out an LP, that would be all it would take. You could put all that music out again that you'd already paid the musicians to record, that you'd already had your singers come and record for. You could put it all out again as a dub album. One of the producers with a rich catalog of music to draw from was Winston Riley, whose roots went back to the Rocksteady era. He was a member of the Techniques, soon started his own Techniques label and began putting out some very high quality productions of his own, which carried on for decades. Kind of a unsung reggae producer. He put out a series called Meditation Dub. This is the first volume. This is kind of a later pressing on his own Techniques label. Heavy pressing again. Got kind of the foggy, kind of dodgy Jamaican pressings. Actually plays really nice. I was listening to this the other night. One good thing about doing these spotlight videos is getting me digging in the shelves, pulling out records I haven't listened to for a while, and rediscovering them. It's been fun that way. Cracking dub album this right here. For some reason when I first was listening to this, didn't really click that much. Listening to it again, yeah, this is great stuff on here. Dub mixes of top shelf Winston Riley productions, Slim Smith's Born to Love You, Johnny Osborne's Purify Your Heart. He was well known for his Stalag rhythm, I think, which was the source for Ring the Alarm, heavily sampled in hip hop. Winston Riley production, that's on here. So top shelf Winston Riley productions mixed for the dub market here. There's a whole series of these. For some reason I don't have volume 2. Volume 3 is here, all the same cover artwork, just different color palettes. And Techniques label, Techniques Productions. As the dub explosion really kicked off, single artist dub albums began to appear, maybe most notably Burning Spear's Garvey's Ghost, which was a full-length dub counterpart to his seminal Marcus Garvey album. Appeared as Garvey's Ghost on the Mango label. This dub was remixed more with an international audience in mind. Probably faster pitch, so a little bit of extra instruments here and there. Not pure Jamaican dub, but definitely geared to the crossover market at the time. But in strictly cultural dub, roots dub fashion, Burning Spear's further albums were treated to undiluted dub in the Living Dub series. Living Dub Volume 1. Several of these I found locally. Another heavy pressing here on his own Burning Spear label. I know for a fact I found this one locally at Beat Street Records back when I first started getting into reggae vinyl. Lucky local find. Burning Spear, Living Dub Volume 1 and Volume 2 here. These were versions of his Hail Him and, what was the other one? Hail Him and one of his later albums. Name escapes me at the moment. Further single artist albums, Big Youth, the great DJ Big Youth responded with Reggae Gidam Dub on his own Nicola Delita album. These are versions to his Progress album. Mixed, I believe, by Sylvan Morris. Yep, Sylvan Morris on there again. Kind of unsung dub mixer at Harry J's studio once again. Hope you can see that. Reggae Gidam Dub. That was another local find. Record Fair. Bunny Wailer of the original Wailers came out with his dub disco series, versions from his albums on his own Solomonic label. Solomonic, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Cover's kind of coming apart on that one. Made in Jamaica. So the dub explosion was well underway. There was a flood of dub albums, but King Tubby's studio definitely was the main channel, with a few notable exceptions. I've talked about Errol Thompson and the Joe Gibbs studio, which put out not a huge amount of dub albums, but definitely some highly regarded ones that went a long way to crossing dub over to an international market, especially in the UK. But King Tubby studio, other mixers at the controls. King Tubby's Prophecies of Dub. This was actually number 16 on that Black Echoes list I mentioned in the intro. Fairly obscure album nowadays. I hadn't even heard of this until this reissue just came out from Pressure Sounds in the UK. Not to be confused with the original King Tubby's Prophecy of Dub. This is again sourced through Yabby U. Vivian Jackson. There's only one of his rhythm tracks on here. For some unknown reason, he went back into King Tubby's vaults, King Tubby's tape vaults, and found some Bunny Lee produced rhythms, which were then mixed by Pat Kelly, the great singer Pat Kelly, who I have done a spotlight on. He had a little known sideline as recording engineer, as dub mixer, was working for King Tubby at this time as one of his apprentices. King Tubby's Prophecies of Dubs. Actually, Pat Kelly at the controls for these dub mixes. Very nice dub album. Just recently picked that one up. Brand new reissue. So this has been the 4th chapter of my look at the history and development of dub. I'm going to continue this series in future chapters as we go through some of the dub albums in my collection. Hope you've enjoyed, guys, and cheers.